All right. Well, it's my pleasure to be here with you today, Jay. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for our listeners?
My name is Jay Flores. I am a SHIP lifetime member. Started out as a student at the University of Wisconsin. I am now in part of the South Florida professional chapter. SHIP has been a very significant part of my development, first into getting to engineering, and then going off now on my own as an entrepreneur, and has really framed everything I do in terms of reaching kids and getting them excited about science, technology, engineering, and math.
That's great. Awesome. We know that there needs to be more kids, especially Hispanic kids, getting involved into STEM. So thank you for doing that work. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? Where did you start and how did you get involved with STEM in the first place?
Yeah, so from the time I was born, I was curious. Like I was always experimenting with things. My favorite toys was the empty box that I would create into these different things. And I actually have a really cool picture that I found recently of me as a kid playing in a box, and I had the most like excited, curious face. But I've also heard stories from like my mother who said I would bring out the pots and pans in the kitchen and I would start messing around with that as she was cooking. And the coolest part is that she didn't get bothered by that. She allowed me to explore because what she realized was that I was experimenting. For me,
Right.
it was, why does the wooden spoon sound different than the metal spoon? And she gave me that safe space to explore and experiment, even though it may have been a little bit annoying at first. And it definitely didn't have anything to do with musical talent because once I could quit piano, like I was done as soon as they allowed me to. But now, actually, my parents just retired, and we have all the VHS tapes now that they brought down to Florida. And last time we were over there, we got to watch a lot. I found one in particular where I was designing my first airplane. I was like 3 years old. It sounds like this child prodigy engineer. Absolutely not. My airplane was made out of couch cushion. But the cool thing about that is instead of, my dad coming downstairs into the basement and realizing that I tore the couch apart and getting mad at me for that and telling me to put it back organized, he pulled out the video camera, started recording me and asking me questions about my airplane.
Um,
And so they gave me all these fun, safe ways to experiment, to be curious, to figure things out. And I feel like that's what really helped me go down that path. Even though there weren't any engineers in my family, I didn't know what an engineer was. Math and science, I was kind of good at it, but they were like my harder grades to do well in,
yeah.
my harder subjects to do well in. So I didn't necessarily have like engineer stamped on me from the beginning, but it was like, this kid is curious. Let's let him explore. And eventually that did lead to a career in STEM.
That's awesome. That's really, I think it's inspiring, especially for parents whose kids might have that same inclination to experiment, to try things. And sometimes it might be a bother for parents, especially when they're busy dealing with their own things. But providing them with that safe space seems like a really pivotal part of allowing a child to learn what it is that they're interested in and maybe even being their first step into getting involved with engineering. So that's pretty great. Yeah. So you were really interested in learning, experimenting, and building things at a young age. How did that turn into an academic pursuit?
Yeah. So that then transformed that, my parents helped set that foundation, right? They set me up for success. They also stressed the importance of education. I had two options growing up, and that was college or college. And so I knew I had to go in that direction, but it was actually a couple of my math teachers that didn't even do anything extraordinary. It wasn't like I had the coolest math classes or the coolest science classes, but there was two particular teachers that took the time to say, I think you should explore engineering. It was that one sentence that actually the first time I didn't listen to, but then the second time I heard it again from a teacher, is where I was like, okay, maybe I should start looking down this path. People are kind of guiding me towards that.
Yeah.
And I didn't take the hard level math in high school. I took all the easy math, and it was still a little bit hard for me to get. I still got an A, but it was like a 90, right? I could just get an A. So I'm like, why would I take all this extra math and do these things? Like, why do these people think I'm good at it? And it's just that small seed of confidence in somebody. My parents planted in me early on, you can be whatever you want to be, right? And then the teachers took it to that next level. Let's look at engineering. Let's look at a STEM career. And that then encouraged me to, whenever I had these like summer camp opportunities, to check the box for engineering as one of the options of things that I was interested in,
Right.
which led to my time at the engineering summer camp at the University of Wisconsin.
Oh,
And that's where I ended up really figuring out, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to study engineering. I'm not sure exactly which kind yet, but this is definitely a path I want to take.
Wow. So I think the adage of it takes a village, right, to raise a kid and
Yes.
really proved true where you had both your parents' support and then it doesn't have to be all your teachers, but you had some teachers
Yeah.
supporting you and guiding you in that direction. So that's great. It's
It's
good that you had good role models.
And the
Uh,
best part is it was just small things. Like, it was just those kind of comments and that confidence. 'Cause I think kids are curious. They have tons of every kid has potential, but
yeah.
not enough children receive that seed of confidence that allows them to fully explore their potential.
Yeah. 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 And I do think that's kind of a, sometimes it might be a little bit of a weak point within our Hispanic culture
Mhm.
where children are not usually given like that type of confidence, like you can do whatever you want. A lot of times because of the fact that a lot of families are first immigration immigrants, it might be that they're in survival mode, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
you need to just get a job,
Yeah.
make money, help the family out. But it's good that we're starting to, I think, pivot away from that,
Yeah.
where I think Hispanic parents are starting to realize the importance of letting children have that confidence and giving them the wings, so to
Yes.
speak, to do what it is that they can do to reach their full potential. And it seems like you had people in your life that did that for you. And I think that's amazing. And the results, I think, are self evident.
Yeah.
So you decided, I'm going to study engineering post high school. Tell us what that journey was like and what branch of engineering that you eventually landed into.
Yeah. So, tip for any student out there deciding what type of engineer you want. At that point, I was in between mechanical or chemical because at the time, I was interested in alternative fuels for vehicles. I thought that would be a pretty cool industry to be in. So I went to freshman advising and I'm like, this is what I'm interested in. The advisor's looking through my transcripts and she goes, "Oh, you did very well on your IB chemistry exam," similar to AP for those that didn't go to an IB school. "You did very well on your IB chemistry exam. If you choose mechanical engineering, then you've tested out of all college level chemistry. You're done with chemistry." And to a freshman in college that's heard of all of the terrors of organic chemistry and all these other challenging subjects, that sounded like a great idea. Let's dive into mechanical because I can start, more advanced classes right away. But I got a good score on my IB chemistry exam because I loved chemistry. I did well in it because I was passionate about it.
Right.
So looking back at that, I should have dove deep into that passion and that excitement, even if it was a little scary or a little more challenging. And that's what I encourage students to go down the path that you're most passionate about, no matter how challenging that path may look, because the easy route is never going to lead to anywhere good. Right. And the funniest thing is that class that I struggled with the most in all of high school was physics. And guess who takes a lot of physics types courses? Mechanical engineers, right? So I dove into the thing that I disliked the most in high school instead. The one thing that saved me is I found one of the classes I got to take early because I tested out of college chemistry was material science, like an intro to material science class that we had to take. And so I loved that class. It was a good mix of what I liked about chemistry, but also a little more tied to the mechanical engineering side. And so I chose all of my electives in material science. And that's a lot of the basis of what I do now with It's Not Magic, It's Science. It's chemistry, it's material science, it's all these fun things that I've learned along the way that now I get to inspire younger kids to explore.
Wow. That's awesome. And I think you brought up some good points because I feel like there's a lot of information that's missing when you hop from high school to college. I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of the education for college and university is how to just get in,
Yeah,
right? But then once you're there, there might be a lack of information on like, what do you do once you're there? You have your counselor, but a lot of times the counselor is like, how do I get you out of here as quickly as possible,
exactly.
right? So having that information available, and I think that's part of the work that SHIP is doing is like, how can you have a successful career in STEM beginning from college, right?
Mhm.
Because that's really when your career starts, where you can decide like, what are you going to do, what's best for you. And you're not the first person who I've spoken with
Yeah.
that has had a bit of regret about, oh, I did this one thing, and if I would have done this differently, it might have been better, or I didn't know that I had this opportunity, or that I should have, taken these other classes. So
Yeah.
it's good to have that information out there. And that point in time, college or university, is when most people become knowledgeable or become a part of SHIP. Is that
Mhm.
what happened with you?
Yeah, so the funny thing is I avoided SHIP as much as I could my freshman year, which sounds ridiculous because now I'm one of the biggest advocates for it. But For whatever reason, I just thought I needed to just focus just on classes and on grades. And, I had some challenges coming from public school and not having the math background that I needed and all those kinds of things. So the president would ask me all the time. He'd see me at the gym, like, "Oh, are you going to join SHIP? You got to come to this next meeting, blah, blah, blah." I was fortunate enough that I had a scholarship that also included an internship. And so the summer of my freshman year, I got to do an internship, even though I wasn't involved in any organizations. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I ended up having a really good summer. And my manager at the end of the internship is like, "When you came in here, I thought you were 16 years old. I didn't expect anything from you. You did all of these, great things. You're going to thrive, but there's one thing missing from your resume right now, and that's a leadership position." And so at that point, I ran back to campus, like, "Hey, shit, people, remember the guy that was rejecting you guys all the time?" And I was like, "Do you have any leadership positions?" There was one position left, which was presentation chair. And it is so cool that that's the position that was left, because that's literally basically what my career is now. The presentation chair had to go to local high schools and talk to students about STEM. That is literally the foundation for everything that I do today. And my
Wow.
first presentations were terrible. I basically showed them my resume and talked about it a little bit. I probably bored a good amount of students, but throughout all those visits, I started to learn a little bit more about what they were interested in, what they were curious about, what they responded well to, and what they didn't really care about as much. And so that started evolving into this deep passion that eventually led me to become SHIP's youngest national board member ever. So I went from being the least qualified student leader to then 9 months later, I think I was nominated for the national board of directors.
So what happened in those 9 months? What do you think was able to skyrocket your career within SHIP?
I started saying yes to the opportunities that people were presenting me with. Before, I was just very closed to these things that I thought were just distractions, and they ended up actually being really good opportunities. And I got closer to people that were going down the path that I needed to go down, and that had kind of learned and had bumps along the way and could teach me. I also studied abroad during that period at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez, which had the largest SHIP chapter in SHIP history at the time. So
Wow.
then I got to go learn from one of the biggest chapters, and I just going from, a couple of students in Wisconsin, right, where there's not very many of us, to then hundreds in Puerto Rico, and being able to see the impact this could have. And then also going to national convention, coming from that small community to then seeing thousands of students that have similar journeys and mentors and role models there for it. It just it just sunk in, and I was like, this is what it should be like everywhere. And I want to be part of spreading this. So I just got this deep, strong passion for getting out to events, for volunteering, for supporting, for competing in the regional competitions, doing all kinds of activities that I could, which helped me grow, but then also gave me a greater sense of community. It gave me a reason bigger than myself to grow, which is what allowed me to, I think, kind of fast track that leadership role.
Wow. That's really amazing. Because I do think that a lot of people feel like you did when you first learned about SHIP, where they think about it as this is just one more thing for me to do on top of all the responsibilities they already have.
Mhm.
I don't know if I have the bandwidth to do this, but there are a lot of advantages, right? For them
Yeah.
to take. It's not just they're giving to SHIP.
Mhm.
SHIP offers a ton of advantages. What are some of the benefits that you received by being a member of SHIP that you think others might also be able to benefit from?
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to put into perspective, how much you get out of SHIP when you put stuff in. I feel like everything I've gotten is 10 times more than what I put in, even though I've put in a lot of hours, both as a student and as a professional, now as a content creator supporting the conference. But there's just something about being closer to this community that connects you to more opportunities, right? And so it might not be that specific activity that you did, but it's that person that you met there that saw what you did that then connects the dots for you to something you didn't even know existed or was out there. So there's so many intangible. If I had to think a little bit more of some of the tangible things, it was that person that reviewed my first resume that was absolute trash and had the grace to sit down with me and help kind of polish that a little bit and help me understand that. It was the upperclassmen that told me which professors to take and which ones to avoid. It was going to conference and learning from professionals about how to develop different skills. Like I could list this for days on all the different tangible benefits. And on top of that, the familia, the opportunities that I talked about earlier that are a little bit harder to notice right away, but have taken me to where I am today.
And that leads me perfectly into my next question. Where are you today? What happened? You graduated. I think most people will say, like, I need to get a job ASAP.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of like the rest of their career is just focusing on that one job. But I know for a fact that wasn't your journey. So why don't you tell us what it was that you did and have accomplished after graduation?
Yeah, if I had to like guess when I was in college where I would be right now, more than 10 years later, I would have had the totally wrong answer, but I'm really happy with what it's become. And that's because it evolved throughout that whole period, and SHIP was kind of the seed that started it. But graduated. I started a career at Rock Automation, a wonderful company that's a big supporter of SHIP. I was in technical sales, so I was out on the road. At that time, I took on a role as regional vice president, which was a national board of director role at that time. And my career, since I was in sales and I was driving all over the state of Florida and Georgia, allowed me to go out to chapters and to meet students and to be able to do some regional events and things like that, that just amplified everything I was doing and allowed me to present at more colleges and universities and take on more projects. And I was just doing all of this STEM outreach during kind of my nighttime, my second job, I guess you would call it, to the point where one of our vice presidents recognized that. And she was like, "You're like our STEM ambassador." And we both kind of paused for a second and looked at each other and we pretty much basically said at the same time. And that should be a thing. Like it should be an actual role. So I went and it took about a year, but I worked with her to create my own job, my dream job at the company. I was the global STEM ambassador for 5 years at Rock Automation. I got to travel all over the world supporting youth in STEM via robotics, via organizations like SHIP and SWE, and really just like live out my passion while getting paid by my employer to do that full time. It was
Wow.
100% my responsibility, not a side job, not a volunteer role. I was paid to have the STEM strategy for the organization. And it wasn't just like there was a group within the company already that did the philanthropy and where the money goes. Mine was more the strategy of how do we make sure these students have great opportunities to interact with our products, understand what we do, get them into things like robotics, and then help them see their real life applications to what they're doing. And that wasn't awesome enough, pandemic hit and I didn't get to travel as much. And so eventually I got to a point where I was like, I'm going to have to quit my dream job, but in order to start my dream business. And so I went off on my own. I do very similar work, but now for a wide variety of organizations, nonprofits, corporations, etc. And so I started my business, Invent the Change, in beginning of 2021, where basically my mission is to change the world by inspiring young minds to keep doing cool things with STEM. The keyword there being keep, because I think kids are already naturally curious as I was when a child, and we just need to make sure that they have those awesome experiences, safe, fun places to keep exploring. That's when It's Not Magic, It's Science was born. And once kind of we got back to in-person type events, I created a kit for It's Not Magic, It's Science. We have a live tour now where I'm going across the country to schools, museums, corporations, basically showing kids how fun science can be. And it is the most rewarding, most exciting, fun career I could ever have dreamed of. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I mean, I've competed on American Ninja Warrior and brought my experiments there. I've done experiments for former NFL players. This past week, I was on the red carpet in Los Angeles for a movie premiere that had some connections to science,
Wow.
taking interviews and photos and all this stuff that, I never got to see science celebrated in those ways when I was growing up. I never got to see someone that looked like me in those spaces. And now I get to be that person that a lot of young people will now see themselves in.
Yeah, so you didn't have to wait for somebody else to do those things. You just had to take that work on yourself and like you said, be that person in those spaces. So I think that's really incredible. And I think a lot of people will be inspired by your story. For any people who are just starting out their STEM journey, might possibly be in their first years of college. What advice do you have to them when things might get a little bit tough, or they might say, I don't know if I can do this? I don't know if this is the path for me. Like, I love it, but I just don't
Yeah.
know if I'm able to do it.
I give them the advice that I give the little ones as well. And that's just because science, math, engineering are difficult doesn't mean you're bad at it. And there were tons of times where I wanted to and actually sometimes tried to quit engineering. Fortunately, I had people that helped, kind of ground me and stay focused on it. But it's meant to be difficult. We are doing things that have never been done before, right? If you want to cure cancer, nobody's done that. There's no easy step process. You need to figure it out. It's going to be hard along the way, but it's rewarding. Same if you're trying to invent a car that doesn't pollute, right? Nobody's done that before. It's going to be very difficult to figure out exactly how to do it in a manner that is safe and cost effective, etc. There's tons of challenges, and there's going to be times where you feel like you don't belong. Some people like to call it imposter syndrome. I hate that term, but I actually think it's something that you want. And the reason why I say it's something that you want is because what imposter syndrome really is, it's one of two things. It's either you're in a non-inclusive environment that doesn't support and guide you. And so in that case, you might want to decide, is this place too toxic for me? And should I go somewhere else and find a place where I'm appreciated? Or is it maybe something that I can change and I want to be part of the catalyst that makes this a more welcoming and inclusive environment? But that's hopefully a small percentage of what imposter syndrome is. I think what the real majority of what most people feel is that you're at the edge of your comfort zone and you feel like an imposter because you've never been in this space before, or maybe you've never even seen someone that looks like you in this space before, but you're just pushing your boundary just a little bit. And the reason why I say I want you to feel imposter syndrome is because I want you to push your comfort zone. I want you to be at the edge of that as much as you can, because that's where innovation happens. That's where growth happens. That's where all the cool things that you want in life start to, you start to get those things because it forces you to grow in order to be in those spaces. So you're always going to feel that along your journey, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a good thing. Just keep yourself focused. Think back to your why and why you started this journey in the first place, or what means a lot to you. For me, it was family. I'm the oldest of all my siblings and cousins. So I was setting that example and setting the stage for them to be able to do great things. For other people, it might be other things, but keeping that very close to your heart. And then also just keeping kind of like a log of the things that you have accomplished, the times that you have gotten over those humps. I
Yeah.
know that you can do it again.
Yeah. And I do think that last point is extremely valuable as well, because I feel like a lot of times when people are undergoing their journey, it's really hard for them to look back and look at what they've achieved. A lot of times we look back and we think like, oh, it's the mistakes I've made,
Yeah.
right? Or what could I have done better? But a lot of times it's hard for us to like realize that we've worked so hard to get to where we are, and that if we keep working hard, we can keep getting further. So that's great advice. I also wanted to ask you if you had any advice for people who are parents who want to give their children those safe spaces for them to express themselves, to grow. Is there something you would recommend to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard. Parenting in general is difficult as it is. But allowing them to explore and do what they need to do to stay curious is even more challenging for a couple reasons. One, because like I did, you might make a mess, throw the pots and pans or the couch cushions around. So in those moments, just try to, before you get ready to say, what are you doing with the pots and the pans? And what are you doing with the couch? Put that back. Just take a second to think, okay, is this just a moment of craziness that they're just throwing stuff around? Or is this a potential opportunity for exploration, for learning, for curiosity? You're going to be okay putting the pots and pans away, and you can make them clean it up afterwards, but give them a second to explore what they wanted to do. The other one is the other area where this really comes up is the question why, especially in young ones, toddlers, getting into elementary school as well. It continues on. We see it less later, but I'll explain why we shouldn't see it less later. Kids start asking all these questions because everything is new to them. Everything is an experiment. From the time you open your eyes, I think kids are engineers because everything is new and they're trying to figure out how the world works. So if every time they ask why or they ask you a question, it just gets shut down, or it's because I said so, or in classrooms sometimes it's because you need to get to the next grade, right? You don't get these good explanations of why things are the way they are, or you don't even get the opportunity to explore it. It just gets shut down right away. kids are going to stop asking questions. That's why you don't hear why as much from your elementary and middle school, and then definitely not in high school students, because we've crushed that curiosity out of them and they just accept things the way they are. And that is the biggest barrier to innovation, is just not having enough kids that ask the question why and want to think about how we can do things differently. So it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of curiosity yourself as well. But giving them that safe space to be curious is going to do wonders for their future, not just in a STEM career, but in any career, because that's where you get innovative ideas for whatever type of job you're doing. And then the last thing I'll share with that is you don't need to know the answers all the time. I feel like also parents get anxiety about,
Yeah.
especially math and science, like, what is the answer? You don't need to get them to the right answer. What you need to do is continue to create that safe place to explore. They'll figure it out eventually if they're passionate.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I think especially if maybe the parents aren't as studied
Mhm.
as, they want their children to be, they might feel like, well, I don't know the answer to that. And I don't have an answer for them, but it can be a learning experience for both parties, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, let's find out together. Let's do this. And, why is the sky blue? Let's go look at a book. Let's go look at the
Yeah.
library, all these things. And they might get those questions answered in science class if they have, good teachers, but sometimes
Mhm.
it might not, right? They might be in a public school where the teacher's stretched thin, but that way, at least, like, they already have that information because of the upbringing that they're getting from their parents, and they might find other questions that they, find out the answer for themselves
Yeah.
because they've been given that safe space. They've been told to feed their curiosity, and so I think that's definitely incredible advice.
And if you don't know and you're worried and you're kind of freaking out, just pose a question back at them. They might figure it out themselves. They might just go explore down a different path, but it's just keeping that curiosity kind of juice flowing.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of times when that's crushed, we get what we have now with a lot of society where we have like the world's information at our fingertips, right?
Mhm.
With the internet, the AI,
Yeah.
the search engines. And a lot of people just don't have that curiosity to learn about the things that they interact with every day. It's
Yeah.
like sometimes I ask people like, hey, one of the things that got me really into like science was wondering like, how do cell phones work? How is
Yeah.
it that we transmit data like and you can't see anything? And people are like, well, I don't know how that works. Like, have you ever wondered? I don't know. I haven't really
Yeah.
wondered. So feeding that curiosity will allow, I think, children to be able to like learn and then do something with that information because it's that sense of like learning, curiosity that can get them to places where they can really excel.
Yeah. One other resource I want to share with parents for that is one of my bigger projects is with Discovery Education. It's a program called Mystery Science. We basically answer questions that K to fifth graders submit. Everything I've done everything from how are Lego bricks invented to why don't we fall out of roller coasters when they go upside down? How do they make imaginary movie characters look so real? All these like really cute, curious questions that kids have that Google doesn't have a kid version answer for, but then allow the kids to come up with their own theories and then give fun explanations that's at the language level that they need with lots of cool visuals and examples. And that has just helped me stay so curious that I can't imagine what it does for the younger students. So again, if you're struggling, if your kid is asking way too many questions, guide them to mystery science and maybe we've answered it already and you can find more fun ways and resources for them to keep exploring that at a level that's safe for them and meant for their age group.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you bring up. A lot of times, it's hard when we look up an answer and it's like, okay, let's find out why, why the sky is blue, and then you get into like light and the way that photons work, and then the way materials reflect light, and so it might be that you're like, okay, well, I don't know how to explain this to my child, so it's good that you offer those child friendly ways of explaining those complex topics because that way they can get introduced and get their curiosity satiated and they can
Mm.
start understanding the way the basics of the world work. So you've clearly had a very successful journey and career. What are some challenges that you faced along the way that you might have? You mentioned that you thought about stopping or even tried to stop a few times that career. So what are some of those challenges that you encountered and what kept you going?
Yeah, it's hard for anybody, right? No matter how well you prepared you are. And if we're trying to be at the next level of innovation and we want to be at the cutting edge of technology, it's going to be challenging. I always try to stay grounded in my why. And that allowed me to keep moving forward because it's easy to give up on yourself. It's really difficult to give up on people that you care about. So I had at my desk, I had all the baby pictures of my younger cousins and my sister. And that was like that reminder of like, that's who you're doing it for. They weren't babies anymore. I just felt like that was like the cutest one,
Right.
like the best one. You can't give up on that baby.
That's so cute.
But then also when I graduated, I had all those pictures in my shirt pocket next to my heart with me as I was going across the stage. I got to, kind of wave to them, take a second to like absorb the moment of graduation and wave. But then that next step was like, all right, now it's time to keep moving so that the world is a better place for them and for all those others coming after. So I may have been the first and only engineer in the family at that point, but my commitment to them and to the rest of the community was that I wouldn't be the first and only, but I'd be the first of many. Now my youngest cousin is in SHIP. He's studying engineering, hopefully graduating within the next couple of years. I've got another cousin that's doing technical work, another one that studied something else, but now she's doing a cybersecurity training. So it's awesome to see that that made an impact on my family, but even more so the many students that I've connected with over the years. And so each one of those then becomes like extra fuel for that journey and extra reasons to keep going. Because now it's very difficult in a different way. I've made it, I had my success, but now I'm trying to change the world, which is much more difficult than just changing my own world, right? And so a lot of times, like recently, I got to do this really cool thing for the Radical movie premiere. And prior to that, we did like a segment on Despierta America on Univision. And we got to do experiments at the high school with Eugenio Derbez, the actor from the movie, which is like an icon. It was like one of the coolest things I've done. But then it came day for it to air, right? And I'm watching Despierta America, which is like a 3 to 4 hour program. And they didn't know exactly what time of the segment it would air. So I had to watch the thing. And all of like the news and things that they were covering and like celebrity trash, gossip and issues. And I got depressed waiting to see my segment that I should have been like so excited to see. And I'm like, this is the norm. Like we're here because this movie's coming out and the production probably paid a lot to be able to have this segment.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, this content wouldn't be here. And all that people would be hearing and seeing is all of this negativity and things that we don't need to be celebrating as a community, but that we put in the spotlight for whatever reason. And especially when we have only a couple Spanish language channels that people have, there's not a lot of options for you to find good quality content for kids or even adults.
Yeah.
And so like right now for me, the hardest part is just like putting so much heart and energy and time into it, knowing that there's like an equal amount of garbage out there that's trying to distract and stop our progress. Not always intentionally, but that is a distraction and an easy way out for a lot of people to just watch that instead of something educational, something empowering. I just think of every time I have a live show and a kid comes up and asks a question. I had kid ask for hugs before, after the shows and stuff. And I was like, okay, I know I'm making a difference. I know I'm reaching these students. I know there's a lot of other distractions, but if I don't do it, right, these kids aren't going to have someone that looks like them doing something positive around them. And then now I just need to help create like another army around me of people doing that through things like SHIP and other organizations so that those kids don't just get one touch point, but they get multiple positive connections outside of all the distractions that are not so great in our world and even the negative sentiment sometimes towards the Hispanic. How do we take control of our own narrative and build on that positivity and provide the skills and resources they need to do whatever it is they want to do?
Yeah, definitely. You touched on a lot of points that I feel really strongly about, and I'm with you. I think it's sad that we celebrate a lot of negative, I think, aspects of humanity, and that's what grabs our attention. It's really hard sometimes, especially when kids are at school all day, adults are at work all day. You come home and to then say like, I just want to shut my brain off, turn
Right.
on TV and not have to think, right? And that's what they, most of the time they put on TV. It's stuff that
Yeah,
you really don't have to activate your brain for at all. It's just like, oh man, who did what? Like,
exactly.
but it's interesting that what really gets us ahead as a community is that continuous learning, that continuous curiosity, that
Mhm.
continuous search for just betterment,
Yeah.
because that's how we ourselves can grow, and we can use that knowledge within our careers, pass that knowledge on to the future generations, help them be even more successful than we are. And it's really the values, I think, outweigh the little bit of work that it might take sometimes to just push through the pain
Yeah, exactly.
and then keep learning and then taking some of that educational content. And I'm glad that there are people like you that are, putting out that content, sharing that content, and making sure that it reaches people at a young age, because that's when it's the most important.
Yeah.
Because that's when people's, children's brains are being molded and
Yes.
their personalities are being shaped. And the fact that we can tell them like learning is okay, asking questions is okay.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you're doing that. You're involved in engineering, you're involved with science, you're involved with technology. This last, I think, 100 years has seen ridiculous amounts of advancement in technology, in science, medicine, all aspects. Humanity feels like it's like rushing to like advance.
Yeah.
Is there something that has you excited about the future? Any new technology, any new science discovery that you feel like, wow, this is really neat. I can't wait to see what people do with it.
Yeah. I feel like things come out a little bit faster now, and AI is the big one right now, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a segment of the population in the Hispanic community between, I'd say, like K to fifth grade, that is a significant portion of the U.S. population, right? When you look at that age group, the Hispanic population takes up a significant percentage of that. And so if we figure out how to get that group of students interested, prepared, not fearful of AI and all the possibilities that it can provide for us, all the different ways that it can allow you to amplify what it is that you're passionate about and what your career goals are, or to help grow your small business with resources that you may not have been able to afford before, or know where to go for, we can make a significant shift in the community as a whole. And so whether it's AI or other things that people are passionate about within the STEM fields that we know will have a significant impact on the future, we need to make sure that our little ones are figuring out, ways to get involved with that. It could be other things like coding, doing things like the Hour of Code and code.org, these activities that you don't really have to be an expert to start teaching and getting that spark of curiosity, because the websites have all the resources and they're fun and they're engaging and they're made for kids. We just got to make sure that we're taking our kids to those resources. And I think the other big thing is just a bigger push towards equity in STEM with any organization that's doing stuff out there. Designing with that from the beginning. When I created It's Not Magic, It's Science, I knew that it was during the pandemic, so I knew kids weren't going to have access to fun STEM activities. Families were also going to be potentially income or food insecure, right? There was going to be all these challenges. So I was like, what are some things that I have in my house that I can put together to do some fun experiments? And I found a lot of cool things that you can do. And now to the point where we do like a live show, that's how many cool things we found around our house. And it's just like presenting those opportunities in the right ways, because the biggest barrier to innovation is whether a child's parents have a vehicle or not, which is crazy to think of. That's the one thing that causes students to not have these opportunities. So it's not good enough that your event is free if we can't get the kids to it, right?
Yeah.
So let's get out to them, whether that's through virtual things and social media. That's great. But also more importantly, let's make sure that we're getting people that look like them out in front of them and showing them examples of what they can do, how they can get there, and what's possible for them.
Yeah. Again, you brought up some really great points. The first one that I want to address is that you mentioned there appears to be, I think, a fear of new things sometimes in the Hispanic community, of like some new technology comes out, or medicine, and then we have vaccines, which is a whole other topic, right? But
Yes.
there seems to be a general distrust of new technologies and sciences. And I do think that it's a great point to push within the community, is like get knowledge at the very least of these
Yes.
new technologies, of this new medicine, of this new science. That way, at least you can be better informed in making a decision of how you're going to interact with it.
Mhm.
Obviously, all these things do have their pros and cons. There are people who will use the internet for bad, and there are people who
Yeah.
use the internet for good, but it's a tool at the end of the day, right?
Mhm.
It's just like knives can be dangerous, or they can be used for cooking and they can be beneficial. The same thing with AI, it's the same thing with all
Yeah.
these new things that are coming out. But if we're not informed, then we don't know when it's possibly being used against us, right?
Yeah.
Or when we are not using it correctly ourselves. So I think it's definitely something important to stress, is that there's no harm in being informed about how something works. In fact, it can help us make better informed decisions on how we're going to interact with things or use them possibly in the future.
I think we get caught up in the headlines. People don't have the attention span to learn and go deeper, right? So we get caught and trapped in these headlines that are often sparked with fear or, something to get you to want to click and, or at least react, I think more so now than click even. And so if we don't take that 10, 15, 20 hours at least to learn these new things and figure out how can I apply it to my life, to my business, whatever it may be, then we're just going to live in that fear and we're going to fall further and further behind because the people that do take advantage of these opportunities are going to take steps forward. And then, people may get replaced, but not because AI took your job, but because someone that learned how to use AI to do their job more efficiently or effectively or reach more people is going to do better financially than you and take market share, whatever it may be. So we need to make sure that we're taking that time to do the research and not just listen to the headline.
Yeah, definitely. It's the same thing with computers. When computers were coming out, people were like, computers are going to take our jobs, right? And it's like, and they did, like you said, take some people's jobs who just would not learn about computers or didn't want to learn how to interact with them, how to use them, how they could best do their job with computers. And the same thing's going to keep happening, I think, over and over again. The same thing happened with the horse and buggy.
Exactly.
People were like, oh, like the horse and buggy makers, what about them? And it's like, oh, yeah.
People used to get their ice from frozen lakes, like delivered to them on a horse and buggy, right? It's like, I'm glad we don't have to do that anymore. So we need to view these as opportunities. Some of them might not be for you, but at least take the 10, 15 hours to study and figure out whether this is helpful for you or not. And then you can make your decision.
Yeah. And sometimes people find that they are really into something because they learn about it. They might say like, oh, yo nunca quería usar una computadora, but then they find some sort of program that they love and they're like, oh yeah, like I remember my mom was like, oh, I don't like video games. And then sometime I showed her Peggle and she was so addicted to Peggle.
Now she's a pro.
Yeah, now she's a pro. Yeah, she's better than I am. But it's interesting that it isn't just this one thing. It's an experience. It's a tool. It's a whole, I think sometimes way of shifting our thinking of just thinking about it a little bit more positively. Like there could be something here for me to gain about it, and that can open the doors to opportunity for sure. Well, Jay, it was a great experience having you here on the podcast. I'm 100% sure that people want to hear more from you. So why don't you tell them where they can find more about what you do, what you're doing, and all the programs that you're a part of?
Absolutely. So the easiest is probably to head to my website. So I've got two, jfloresinspires.com. That's just the one that's more about kind of me and what I'm up to. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see all my social media. But for TikTok, Instagram, the bigger ones, it's at jfloresinspires. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. My other website is going to be more for the STEM outreach, the interaction with youth. If you either, from way different levels. If you're a parent that wants some fun activities to do with your kids, if you're someone that's a professional and wants to do more outreach in a fun and unique way, or even corporations that might want to collaborate with me and bring our show out to different communities, that website is inventthechange.com. There you'll have access to all of these Not Magic, It's Science experiments, the mystery science videos that we do. So again, great content with a Hispanic science voice on it. So great for all communities. And you might even be able to find one from your industry, right? A question that a child asked that might be very related to your industry, and you can share that when you're out at events. And then just blogs and general fun information there. Also have a little bit of stuff on STEM careers, but described in a way that like a first grader could understand. And there's so much fun because, like, for example, we use like a computer engineer is a wizard that uses magic spells to make phones and computers do different activities, right? So we frame it in a way that's really fun for kids to think about what their cool career as a computer science wizard could be in the future.
That's great. That's great. I mean, what kid doesn't want to be a wizard, right?
Exactly.
That's perfect. Well, once again, thank you so much, Jay, for being with us. I really enjoyed this time, and hopefully people can go out there and interact with these amazing opportunities that you've provided them with and help the next generation of future engineers be more prepared.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.